I woke up at 5:30 in the morning to a text message that made my stomach drop. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me out of a dreamless sleep. I reached for it, squinting at the screen in the darkness. The message was from my son, Daniel. "Dad, we need to talk about the business. Soon." That was it. No context. No explanation. Just those 9 words that felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. I sat up in bed, careful not to wake my wife, Linda. She was still asleep beside me, her breathing soft and steady. The bedroom was dark except for the faint glow of streetlights coming through the curtains. I read the message again, trying to figure out what it meant. Daniel and I had built the business together. Well, that wasn't quite true. I'd built it from nothing 23 years ago, back when he was still in elementary school, but he'd joined me after college, and for the last 8 years, he'd been my right hand, my partner, my son. We manufactured custom furniture, high-end stuff, mostly for restaurants and hotels. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work. Good money, enough to put both kids through college without loans, to buy this house in the suburbs, to live comfortably. I set the phone down and rubbed my eyes. The clock on the nightstand glowed red. 5:37 a.m. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut, that instinct you develop after decades of business deals and negotiations. When someone says, "We need to talk," at 5 in the morning, it's never good news. I got out of bed and walked to the bathroom, moving quietly through the dark house. The floorboards creaked under my feet. I'd been meaning to fix that for months. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. 52 years old, gray hair starting to creep in at the temples, lines around my eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. I looked tired, I felt tired, but I wasn't weak, not yet. I dried my face and went downstairs to the kitchen. The house was silent. Outside, the neighborhood was still dark. I made coffee, watching the machine drip and sputter, thinking about that message. We need to talk about the business. What about the business? We'd just had our quarterly meeting 2 weeks ago. Everything was fine, better than fine. We'd landed a contract with a hotel chain that would keep us busy for the next 18 months. Orders were up, profits were strong, unless something had changed. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. I wanted to call Daniel right now, demand to know what was going on, but it was too early, and maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was nothing. Except, it wasn't nothing. I knew that. The coffee was too hot. I burned my tongue on the first sip and cursed under my breath. The pain felt appropriate somehow, like a punishment for being stupid enough to think everything was fine. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Linda appeared in the doorway, wearing her robe, her hair messy from sleep. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She walked over and kissed the top of my head, then poured herself coffee. "What's wrong?" "Daniel sent me a message." "At 5 in the morning?" "Yeah." She sat down across from me. "What did he say?" I showed her the phone. She read the message, her expression darkening. "That's odd," she said. "That's what I thought." "Did something happen at the shop?" "Not that I know of." We sat in silence for a moment. Linda sipped her coffee, thinking. She was smart, my wife. Sharper than me in a lot of ways. She'd been the one who pushed me to start the business in the first place, back when I was working construction and dreaming about something better. "Call him," she said. "Find out what's going on. It's too early. He texted you at 5:30. He's awake." She was right. I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Daniel's voice, cheerful and professional. "You've reached Daniel Crawford. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I didn't leave a message. I hung up and tried again. Voicemail. "He's not answering," I said. Linda frowned. "Try his wife." "At 6 in the morning?" "She's probably awake too." I didn't want to call Jessica. My daughter-in-law was complicated. She'd married Daniel 3 years ago, and from the start, something about her had bothered me. She was sweet on the surface, always smiling, always polite, but there was something underneath that smile that felt wrong, like she was acting, playing a role. Linda had noticed it too, though we'd never talked about it directly, just little comments here and there. Jessica seems tense today. Did you notice how she reacted when we mentioned the finances? Small observations that added up to a larger suspicion, but I'd pushed those thoughts away. Daniel loved her. He was happy. That was what mattered. I scrolled through my contacts and found Jessica's number. My finger hovered over the call button. "Go on," Linda said. I pressed it. The phone rang. Once. Twice. "Hello?" Jessica's voice was bright, awake, too awake for 6 in the morning. "Hey, Jessica, it's David. Sorry to call so early." "Oh, hi. No problem. We're up. What's going on?" "I got a message from Daniel about the business. He said we need to talk." There was a pause. Just a second, but long enough for me to notice. "Oh, yeah," she said. "He mentioned something about that. I'm sure it's nothing serious." "What is it?" "I think he just wants to discuss some changes, for the future." "What kind of changes?" Another pause. "I should probably let him explain it. He'll call you later, okay?" "Jessica, I've got to run, David. We'll talk soon." She hung up before I could say anything else. I set the phone down on the table. Linda was watching me with sharp eyes. "Well?" she asked. "She says it's about changes, for the future." "What does that mean?" "I don't know." We looked at each other across the table. The coffee had gone cold in my cup. "I don't like this," Linda said. "Neither do I." The morning light was starting to creep through the windows, another day beginning. But something had shifted. I could feel it, like the air before a storm. By 7:30, I was dressed and ready to head to the shop. Linda was in the shower. I stood in the kitchen, checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for Daniel to call back. Nothing. I sent him another text. "Call me when you get this." No response. I grabbed my keys and wallet, then stopped. Something made me walk to my home office, a small room off the living room where I kept the business files. I unlocked the filing cabinet and pulled out the folder with our financial records. Everything looked normal. Bank statements, invoices, contracts, all in order. But as I flipped through the pages, something caught my eye. A wire transfer. $50,000, sent from our business account to an account I didn't recognize. I stared at the page. The transfer had been made 2 weeks ago, right after our quarterly meeting. The memo line just said, "Investment opportunity." I'd never authorized this transfer. I would have remembered. $50,000 wasn't pocket change. I pulled out more statements, going back 3 months. There were other transfers, smaller amounts. 10,000 here, 15,000 there, all with vague memo lines. Consulting fees, equipment upgrade, marketing expenses. None of which I remembered approving. My hands started shaking. I set the papers down on the desk and took a deep breath. Someone had been moving money out of the business account, and there were only 3 people with access to that account. Me, Linda, and Daniel. I heard footsteps behind me. Linda stood in the doorway, her hair still wet from the shower. "What is it?" she asked. I showed her the statements. She read them silently, her face growing pale. "Did you authorize these?" I asked. "No." "Did you?" "No." We looked at each other. The same thought was occurring to both of us, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. "Maybe Daniel had a good reason," Linda said quietly. Maybe. But I didn't believe it, and neither did she. I gathered up the statements and put them back in the folder. "I'm going to the shop. Wait for him to call you back." "I can't wait." "David, I need to know what's going on." She didn't argue. She just nodded and stepped aside to let me pass. The drive to the shop took 20 minutes. It was located in an industrial park on the edge of town, a big warehouse space we'd been renting for the last decade. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed Daniel's car wasn't there. I unlocked the front door and went inside. The shop floor was empty, the machinery silent. We didn't start work until 8, so I had the place to myself. I went to the office in the back, a small room with a desk and filing cabinets and a computer. I turned on the lights and sat down at the desk. Daniel's desk. He'd been using this office more and more over the last year, taking over the day-to-day operations while I focused on sales and new contracts. I'd thought it was a good thing, a sign that he was ready to take more responsibility. Now I wondered what else he'd been doing while I wasn't watching. I opened the desk drawers. Nothing unusual. Papers, pens, business cards. I turned on the computer and waited for it to boot up. While I waited, I noticed something on the desk, a folder tucked under a stack of invoices. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were documents, contracts, legal papers. I started reading, and with each page my chest tightened. It was a purchase agreement. For the business. My business. Daniel and Jessica were selling it. Not to an outside buyer, to themselves. They were restructuring the company, pushing me and Linda out, taking full ownership. The papers were dated 3 weeks ago. Everything was already in motion. I sat there, holding the folder, trying to process what I was seeing. My son was stealing my business, the company I'd built from nothing, that I'd poured 2 decades of my life into, was being taken away from me, and he hadn't even told me. The office door opened. I looked up. Daniel stood in the doorway. He was wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, looking casual and relaxed. When he saw me holding the folder, his expression changed. Not to guilt or surprise, but to something harder. Resignation, maybe. Or determination. "Dad," he said, "we need to talk." I set the folder down on the desk. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. "Yeah," I said. "I think we do." He closed the door behind him and sat down in the chair across from the desk. For a moment, we just looked at each other. This was my son, the kid I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to balance a checkbook. The young man I'd brought into this business because I thought we'd run it together someday. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. He didn't look away. 6 months. 6 months. It's not personal, Dad. I laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. You're stealing my business and it's not personal? I'm not stealing anything. I'm making changes. Changes that need to happen. By cutting me out? By moving the company forward. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Look, I know this is hard to hear, but the business needs new direction, new leadership. And you think you're that leader? Yes, I do. I felt something cold settle in my chest, not anger yet, something closer to disappointment or grief. What did I do wrong? I asked quietly. Nothing. That's the point. You didn't do anything. You've been coasting for years, Dad. Playing it safe. We could be 3 times bigger than we are now, but you're too scared to take risks. I built this company 20 years ago. Yeah, I know. But that doesn't mean you get to run it forever. It's my company. It's our company. And Jessica and I have been carrying most of the weight for the last 2 years while you and Mom play golf. That wasn't true. I'd been working just as hard as always, but arguing about it wouldn't change anything. You could have talked to me, I said. I tried. You wouldn't listen. Bullshit. You never said a word. Because I knew how you'd react. Just like this. He stood up. The papers are already filed, Dad. This is happening. You and Mom will get a fair payout, a good payout, actually. Enough to retire comfortably. But the business is ours now. No. Excuse me? I said no. This is my company. You don't get to just take it. Daniel's expression hardened. We're not asking for permission. He walked to the door and opened it. Then he looked back at me. I love you, Dad, but this is business. Try not to take it personally." He left, closing the door behind him. I sat alone in the office, the folder still on the desk in front of me. Outside, I could hear the sound of the shop coming to life, workers arriving, machinery starting up. Another day of business as usual, except nothing was usual anymore. I picked up my phone and called Linda. "Come down to the shop," I said when she answered. "We need to talk." She heard something in my voice. "What happened?" "Just come, please." She arrived 30 minutes later. I was still sitting at the desk, staring at the folder. I'd read through every page, looking for some loophole, some way to stop this, but the lawyers had done their work well. Everything was legal. Everything was binding. Linda sat down across from me. I slid the folder across the desk. "Read this," I said. She did. I watched her face as she went through the pages, the confusion, the disbelief, the anger. When she finished, she looked up at me. "They can't do this," she said. "They already have. We'll fight it. Get a lawyer. Sue them." "For what?" "It's all legal. They structured it so they're buying us out at fair market value. We signed papers years ago that gave Daniel partial ownership. This is just the next step." "But we didn't agree to this." "Doesn't matter. The contracts are ironclad." Linda stood up and paced the small office. She was furious, her hands clenched into fists. "That little bastard," she muttered. "And that wife of his. I knew there was something wrong with her." "It's done, Linda. It's over." She spun around. "No, it's not over. This is our business, our life. I'm not just going to let them take it." "What choice do we have?" "We fight back." I looked at her. She was standing by the door, her eyes blazing with anger and determination. In that moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 30 years ago, the woman who'd pushed me to take risks, to build something bigger than myself. "How?" I asked. She came back to the desk and leaned down, her hands flat on the surface. "We find out what they're really doing. All those wire transfers, those expenses. If they're stealing from the company, we expose them. We make sure everyone knows what they've done. And then what? Then we take back what's ours." I thought about it. The anger was starting to build now, replacing the shock. They'd betrayed me, my own son. And he'd done it with a smile on his face, telling me it wasn't personal. I looked at Linda. "All right, let's do it." She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Good," she said, "because I'm not done with them yet." We spent the rest of the morning going through the office, looking for anything that might give us leverage. More financial records, emails, contracts, anything. What we found made everything worse. Daniel and Jessica had been siphoning money for months. Not just the wire transfers I'd seen earlier, but dozens of smaller transactions. They'd set up shell companies, fake vendors, phantom employees, all designed to drain money out of the business and into their own pockets. The total was close to $200,000. "They're thieves," Linda said, staring at the computer screen. "Our own son is a thief." I felt numb. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? "We take this to the police," Linda said. "And tell them what? That our son is embezzling from his own company? It's still our company." "Not for long." She turned to me. "We have evidence. This is fraud. They can go to prison for this." I thought about Daniel in handcuffs, my son in prison. But then I thought about what he'd said. "It's not personal, Dad." Like he was firing an employee, not destroying his father's life. "No police," I said. "Not yet." "Then what?" I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the shop floor was busy. Workers building furniture, my designs, my company. "We play their game," I said, "but we play it better." Linda came to stand beside me. "What are you thinking?" "They want the business? Fine, let them have it, but not the way they planned." "I don't understand." I turned to her. We make them wish they'd never betrayed us. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, she said. Let's burn it all down. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. That night, I sat in my home office with Linda, spreading every document we'd gathered across the desk. Bank statements, emails, contracts, wire transfer records. Everything that proved what Daniel and Jessica had been doing. It was almost midnight. We'd spent the entire day digging, and the picture was clear now. My son wasn't just taking over the business, he was gutting it. Look at this, Linda said, pointing to an email on her laptop. Daniel sent this to Jessica 3 months ago. He says they need to accelerate the timeline before you notice the missing funds. I leaned over to read it. The words were cold and calculated. No emotion, no remorse, just business strategy. He knew we'd find out eventually, I said. They didn't care. They thought they'd have control by then. I picked up one of the wire transfer receipts. $50,000 to something called Meridian Consulting Group. I'd never heard of them. What is Meridian? I asked. Linda pulled up a search on her laptop. After a few minutes, she shook her head. Nothing. The company doesn't exist. It's a shell. They created it? Has to be. Look at the address. It's registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. Classic fraud setup. Create a fake company, funnel money to it, pocket the cash. I'd taught Daniel better than this, or at least I thought I had. We need to trace where the money went, Linda said. How? The bank. We still have access to the accounts, right? For now. But once the buyout goes through, then we do it now. Tonight. She was right. Once the papers were final, we'd be locked out of everything. This was our only window. I pulled up the banking website on my laptop and logged in. The business account appeared on screen. Current balance, $843,000. A healthy number. But it should have been over $1 million. I clicked through to the transaction history, downloading everything from the last 6 months. The data filled the screen, hundreds of transactions, deposits from clients, payments to suppliers, payroll, operating expenses, and buried in all of it, the transfers. I pulled them out one by one, creating a spreadsheet, each fake company, each phantom payment. By 2 a.m, I had the complete picture. Total amount stolen, $278,000. Jesus, Linda whispered. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. They were burning from staring at the screen. How did I miss this? I said. Because you trusted him. I should have been paying attention. Stop it. This isn't your fault. But it felt like my fault. I'd given Daniel access. I'd taught him how the business worked. I'd handed him the keys to everything I'd built. Linda closed her laptop. So what's the plan? I'd been thinking about that all day. Anger made you want to lash out, to hit back immediately. But that was stupid. Revenge required patience. We document everything, I said. Every transaction, every fake company, every lie. We build an airtight case. And then? And then we use it. To do what? I looked at her. To destroy them. She didn't flinch. How? I don't know yet. But I'll figure it out. We spent another hour organizing the evidence, creating folders on my laptop, backing everything up to a USB drive that I locked in the safe. By the time we finished, it was almost 4 a.m. Linda stood up, stretching. We should get some sleep. You go. I need to think. David. I'm fine. Just go. She hesitated, then kissed the top of my head and left the office. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then silence. I sat alone in the dark office, the only light coming from my laptop screen. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Everyone asleep. Normal people with normal problems. I pulled up Daniel's Facebook page. Pictures of him and Jessica, smiling, happy. They'd gone to Hawaii last month. Posted photos of beaches and sunsets. The The trip had cost at least $10,000. Our money, stolen from the business they were taking from us. I closed the laptop and stood up, walking to the window. The street was empty, a few cars parked along the curb, streetlights casting orange pools on the pavement. I thought about what Linda had said. Let's burn it all down. Maybe that was the answer. Not to save the business, but to make sure Daniel and Jessica lost everything. If I couldn't have it, neither could they. But I needed to be smart, calculated. They'd made the first move, but I'd make the last one. The next morning, I called our family lawyer. His name was Richard Barrett, and I'd used him for years. Estate planning, business contracts, the usual stuff. He was expensive but good. His secretary put me through immediately. David, how are you? I need to see you. Today, if possible. Is everything all right? No, can you fit me in? He paused. I have an opening at 3. Will that work? Perfect. I hung up and looked at Linda. She was standing in the kitchen doorway holding a cup of coffee. What are you going to tell him? She asked. Everything. At 3 o'clock, I was sitting in Richard's office on the 4th floor of a downtown building. The walls were lined with law books. His desk was immaculate. Richard himself was in his 60s, gray hair perfectly combed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. I laid out the documents in front of him. He read through them silently, his expression growing more serious with each page. When he finished, he set the papers down and looked at me. This is fraud, he said. I know. Clear-cut embezzlement. If you take this to the authorities, your son will go to prison. I don't want him in prison. I want to stop him. Richard leaned back in his chair. The buyout agreement is legal. They structured it properly. But if you can prove fraud, you might be able to void the contract. Might? It would require litigation, probably a year or more. And even then, there's no guarantee. What if we go public? Tell everyone what they did? You could, but that might hurt you as much as it hurts them. The business would be tainted. Clients might leave. You'd lose value. I nodded. I'd already thought of that. Is there another way? I asked. Richard tapped his fingers on the desk. Tell me what you want to accomplish. I want them to lose. Everything. The business, the money, their reputation. I want them to regret what they did. That's a tall order. Can you help me or not? He studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly. I might have an idea, he said. He explained it over the next 30 minutes. It was complicated, risky, and completely ruthless. I loved it. The plan required time and patience. We'd let the buyout proceed as planned. Let Daniel and Jessica think they'd won. But in the meantime, we'd set traps. Small things they wouldn't notice until it was too late. The key, Richard said, is to make them destroy themselves. How? They're embezzling. That means they're desperate for cash. Let them get more desperate. He outlined a strategy. We'd manipulate the business finances, creating artificial problems that would force Daniel and Jessica to steal even more money. Bigger amounts, sloppier methods, easier to trace, and when they were in deep enough, we'd expose them. It's a long game, Richard warned, and it might not work. I don't care. I want them to suffer. He nodded. Then we'll make them suffer. I left his office feeling better than I had in days. I had a plan now, a path forward. I drove home, thinking about the next steps. First, I needed to set up the financial traps. That would require access to the business accounts, which I still had, for now. Second, I needed to make sure Daniel didn't suspect anything. That meant playing along, acting like I'd accepted the buyout. It would mean lying to my son, pretending everything was fine. But he'd lied to me first. When I got home, Linda was waiting in the living room. I told her about the meeting with Richard, about the plan. She listened quietly. When I finished, she said, "This could backfire." I know. If Daniel finds out what we're doing, he won't. We'll be careful. She looked at me. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes. Once we start, there's no going back. I know. She nodded slowly. All right, then let's do it. The next few days were tense. I went to work every morning, acting normal. Daniel was there, running the shop floor, dealing with clients. We barely spoke. When we did, it was brief and professional. He seemed relieved that I wasn't fighting the buyout. Maybe he thought I'd accepted it. Moved on. He had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, I started implementing the plan. Small changes to the business finances. A delayed payment here, a canceled order there. Nothing dramatic, just enough to create pressure. I also started documenting everything Daniel and Jessica did. Every meeting, every phone call, every email. I was building a file that would bury them when the time came. Linda helped. She had access to Jessica's social media accounts, and she started screenshotting everything. Posts, photos, comments, anything that showed how they were spending money. Look at this, Linda said one evening, showing me her phone. Jessica posted about a new car, a BMW. I looked at the photo. Shiny red convertible. Probably $50,000. When did she buy that? I asked. 3 days ago. 3 days ago, right after another large wire transfer from the business account. Screenshot it, I said. Already did. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern became clear. Daniel and Jessica were spending money like crazy. New car, expensive jewelry, a vacation to the Caribbean. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They thought they'd won, thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. Meanwhile, I was creating chaos behind the scenes. I delayed payments to key suppliers, which caused production problems. I canceled orders from major clients, citing scheduling conflicts. I spread rumors about quality issues. The business started bleeding money. Cash flow problems emerged. Clients got nervous, and Daniel started panicking. I watched it happen in real time. He'd come into work looking stressed. He'd spend hours on the phone trying to fix problems that I'd created, trying to keep things running. But it wasn't enough. The problems kept growing. One afternoon, I was in the office when Daniel burst in. His face was pale. Dad, we need to talk. I looked up from my desk. What's wrong? The Miller contract fell through. They're canceling the order. Why? They said they heard we're having quality problems. Is that true? I shrugged. I haven't heard anything. Well, someone's spreading rumors, and it's costing us. That's unfortunate. He stared at me. Unfortunate? Dad, that was a $200,000 contract. We can't afford to lose that kind of business. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to push me out. His expression hardened. This isn't the time for grudges. I'm not holding a grudge. I'm just pointing out reality. He turned and left, slamming the door behind him. I sat back in my chair, smiling. Everything was going according to plan. That night, Linda and I reviewed the latest financial data. The business was losing money fast. In the last 2 weeks, profits had dropped by 30%. Daniel's going to figure out what you're doing, Linda said. Maybe, but by then it'll be too late. What if he goes to the police and tells them what? That his father is sabotaging the business they're stealing? They'll laugh at him. She didn't look convinced. This is dangerous, David. I know. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Trust me. She did trust me, but I could see the worry in her eyes. The truth was, I wasn't sure how far I was willing to take this. The plan was to expose Daniel and Jessica, to ruin them. But actually doing it? Destroying my own son? That was harder than I'd expected. But every time I thought about backing off, I remembered that folder on Daniel's desk, the buyout agreement, the cold, calculated way he'd told me it wasn't personal, and the anger came flooding back. 2 days later, I got a call from Richard. We have a problem, he said. What kind of problem? Daniel filed a restraining order. Against you. I froze. What? He claims you've been sabotaging the business, harassing him, threatening him. That's bullshit. I know, but he has a court order. You can't go within 500 feet of the shop. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. He's trying to lock me out. That's exactly what he's doing. And it might work. The judge granted a temporary order. There's a hearing in 2 weeks. I hung up and stared at the wall. Daniel was smarter than I'd given him credit for. He'd figured out what I was doing and was trying to cut me off. But he'd made a mistake. By filing that restraining order, he'd shown his hand. He was desperate, scared. And scared people made mistakes. I called Linda into the office and told her what happened. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "We go to war." Jessica was arrested 2 hours later. They found her at home. The car was in the driveway, and the police impounded it immediately. Daniel wasn't there. According to the neighbors, he'd left early that morning. No one knew where he'd gone. I watched the arrest on the local news. They showed Jessica being led out of her house in handcuffs. She looked small and scared, not at all like the smug, manipulative woman I'd come to know. Linda sat beside me on the couch. "This is really happening." "Yeah, it is." "What about Daniel?" "He'll turn up." But I wasn't sure about that. Daniel was smart. If he'd realized Jessica had been caught, he might have run. The police called me that afternoon. They wanted me to come down to the station to give a statement. I drove downtown and met with a detective. His name was Tom Brennan. He was in his 40s, with short gray hair and sharp eyes. "Mr. Crawford," he said, shaking my hand. "Thanks for coming in." "Of course." We sat in an interrogation room. It was small and windowless, with a table and 2 chairs. Brennan had a folder in front of him. "I've been reviewing your case," he said. "It's complicated. That's one word for it. Tell me what happened, from the beginning." I told him everything. The embezzlement, the buyout attempt, the fire, the vandalism, the threats, all of it. Brennan took notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You've been through a lot," he said. "That's an understatement. Do you think your son was involved in last night's incident?" "I think he planned it. Jessica was just following orders." "Can you prove that?" "No, but it makes sense. Jessica wouldn't do this on her own." Brennan nodded. "We're looking for Daniel now, but he's not at home, not at work. We've checked his usual places. He's running. Maybe, or maybe he's planning something else." That thought made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "I mean that people who feel cornered do unpredictable things, and right now, your son is cornered. You think he's dangerous? I think you should be careful." I left the police station feeling uneasy. Brennan was right. Daniel was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. I called Linda from the car. "Where are you?" I asked. "At home. Why?" "Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in." "David, what's going on?" "Just do it. I'll be home in 20 minutes. I drove fast, checking the rearview mirror constantly. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. When I got home, Linda was waiting at the door. "What happened?" "The police think Daniel might try something." "Try what?" "I don't know, but we need to be ready." We spent the rest of the day on edge. Every noise made us jump. Every car that drove past made us look out the window. But nothing happened. At dinner, Linda barely touched her food. "I can't keep living like this." "I know." "When does it end? When Daniel's in custody, or when he gives up?" "What if he doesn't give up?" I didn't have an answer for that. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Linda was asleep beside me, but her breathing was restless. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old warehouse on Miller Road. Alone. 1 hour." I stared at the message. It had to be Daniel. I should have called the police. Should have told them what was happening. But I didn't. I got out of bed and got dressed. Linda stirred. "Where are you going?" she mumbled. Nowhere. Go back to sleep. She didn't argue. I grabbed my keys and left the house. The drive to Miller Road took 15 minutes. The warehouse was an old industrial building on the edge of town. It had been abandoned for years. I pulled into the parking lot. There were no other cars, no lights, just darkness. I got out and walked toward the building. The front door was ajar. Daniel? I called out. No answer. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was pitch black. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The warehouse was empty, just concrete floors and rusted machinery. My footsteps echoed in the silence. Daniel! I called again. A voice came from the darkness. Turn off the light. I turned it off. My eyes adjusted slowly. I could see a figure standing in the shadows. Why did you want to meet? I asked. Because we need to end this. I agree. Turn yourself in. That's not going to happen. Daniel stepped forward. In the dim light, I could see his face. He looked exhausted, haggard. Why did you do it? I asked. Why did you betray me? I didn't betray you. I just wanted what was mine. It wasn't yours. I built that business. And I worked in it for 8 years. I earned it. By stealing from me? By taking what I deserved. I shook my head. You could have just asked. We could have worked something out. No, we couldn't. Because you never would have let go. You would have held on to that business until you died. That's not true. Yes, it is. You're stubborn, controlling. You couldn't stand the idea of me running things. So you decided to steal it? I decided to take control of my own life. We stood there, facing each other in the darkness, and he was a stranger. What now? I asked. Now you back off. Drop the charges against Jessica. Stop talking to the press. Let us disappear. And if I don't? Then things get worse. Is that a threat? It's reality. I took a step closer. You burned down my shop, you vandalized my car, you tried to break into my house, and now you're threatening me again? I'm trying to protect my family. By destroying mine, you're not my family anymore. Those words hit harder than any punch. I felt something break inside me. Fine, I said quietly, if that's how you want it. It is. Then we're done. But I'm not backing off. I'm going to make sure you pay for everything you did. Daniel's expression hardened. Then you've made your choice. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I stood there alone in the warehouse. The anger was gone now. All that was left was emptiness. I drove home in a daze. Linda was awake when I got there, sitting in the living room. Where were you? She asked. Meeting with Daniel. What? I told her what happened. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, You should have called the police. I know. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to talk to him, to understand why he did this. And do you understand? No, I don't think I ever will. We sat in silence for a while. Then Linda said, What do we do now? We finish this. We make sure he pays. The next morning, I called Detective Brennan and told him about the meeting. You should have called us, he said. I know. I'm sorry. Did Daniel say where he was going? No. Did he threaten you? Sort of. He told me things would get worse if I didn't back off. Brennan sighed. We'll put out a warrant for his arrest. But if he's smart, he's already gone. What about Jessica? She's being held without bail. She's not talking. Can you charge her? We're working on it. The evidence is strong, but we need to tie her directly to the arson. What about the break-in? That's solid. She'll go down for that at least. I hung up and looked at Linda. They're charging Jessica. Good. But Daniel's in the wind. He'll make a mistake. They always do. I hoped she was right. Over the next few days, the story continued to dominate the local news. Jessica's arrest, Daniel's disappearance, the embezzlement, the fire. Our names were everywhere. People recognized me on the street. Some offered sympathy, others gave me dirty looks, like I was the bad guy in all this. I stopped going out, stayed home, waited. A week after the warehouse meeting, I got a call from Richard. "David, we have a problem." "What now?" "Daniel filed a lawsuit against you and Linda." "For what?" "Defamation. He's claiming you destroyed his reputation with false accusations." I laughed. It was a bitter sound. "He's suing us?" "Yes, for $2 million. That's insane." "I agree, but it's a real lawsuit. We'll have to respond." "Can he win?" "No, not with the evidence we have, but it'll be expensive and time-consuming." "Do it! I don't care what it costs." I hung up and told Linda. "He's desperate," she said. "I know. That's what worries me." 2 days later, the police called. They'd found Daniel's car, abandoned in a parking lot near the Canadian border. "We think he crossed over," Brennan said. "We've notified Canadian authorities, but if he's using a fake ID, he could be anywhere." "So that's it? He gets away?" "For now. But we'll keep looking." I hung up, feeling defeated. Daniel had escaped. He was gone, but Jessica was still in custody, and the trial was coming. I focused on that, on making sure she paid for what she'd done. The trial started 3 weeks later. It was a media circus, reporters everywhere, cameras, protesters. Linda and I sat in the courtroom every day watching. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, claimed she was manipulated by Daniel, that she didn't know what she was doing. But the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, the text messages, the financial records. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Jessica broke down in tears. Her lawyer comforted her. But I felt nothing. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison, plus restitution for the embezzlement. It wasn't enough. But it was something. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. "Mr. Crawford, how do you feel about the verdict? Are you satisfied with the sentence? Do you think your son will ever be caught?" I pushed through them without answering. Linda held my arm, guiding me to the car. When we got home, I collapsed on the couch, exhausted. "It's over," Linda said. "Not yet. Daniel's still out there. Maybe he'll stay gone. Maybe." But I knew better. This wasn't over. Not really. Daniel was still out there, still planning something, and I'd be ready when he came back. The weeks after Jessica's conviction felt strange, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was behind bars, yes, and the news cycle had moved on to other scandals, but Daniel was still out there, somewhere beyond reach. I became obsessed with finding him. Every morning I'd wake up and check the news. Every evening I'd call Detective Brennan for updates. Always the same answer: nothing, no sightings, no leads, no progress. "He's smart," Brennan told me one afternoon. "He knows how to stay hidden." "How long can he hide?" "As long as he wants. If he's got money and fake documents, he could disappear for years." That thought haunted me. Years of looking over my shoulder. Years of wondering when Daniel would come back to finish what he'd started. Linda tried to get me to move on. "We won," she'd say. "Jessica's in prison. The business is gone, but we got the insurance payout. We can start over." But I couldn't start over, not with Daniel still out there. I spent my days researching. I learned about how people disappear, fake identities, border crossings, offshore bank accounts. I became an expert in escape methods, and I started to understand the scope of what Daniel had planned. "Look at this," I told Linda one evening. We were sitting in the home office, my laptop open on the desk. "What is it?" "Bank records. I finally got access to the shell companies Daniel created. Look where the money went." She leaned over to see the screen. Transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. "He moved over $400,000 offshore," I said. "That's more than we thought." "A lot more, and these accounts are still active." "Meaning what?" "Meaning he has access to them. He's using this money to stay hidden." Linda sat back in her chair. So, what do? We trace the money, find out where he's spending it, and we find him. It wasn't legal, what I was planning. Technically, I didn't have the right to access these accounts, but I didn't care anymore. Daniel had destroyed my life. I was going to destroy his. I hired a private investigator. His name was Ray Kowalski, and he specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. He was expensive, but Richard recommended him. He's the best, Richard said. If anyone can find Daniel, it's Ray. I met Ray at a coffee shop downtown. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face. He looked like he'd seen everything. So you want to find your son, Ray said, stirring his coffee. Yes. And he's currently in the wind. Probably in Canada, maybe farther. That's what the police think. The police aren't always right. Ray pulled out a tablet and opened a file. I've been doing some preliminary research. Your son's smarter than the average fugitive. How so? He didn't just run. He planned this. The offshore accounts. The fake ID. He's been preparing for months, maybe years. Can you find him? Maybe. It depends on how careful he is. If he makes one mistake, one transaction that can be traced, I'll find him. How long will it take? Could be weeks. Could be months. I don't care, do it. Ray nodded. All right. But I need access to everything. Bank records, emails, phone records, anything you have. I gave him everything. Every document, every piece of evidence. Everything Linda and I had collected over the months. Ray spent 3 days reviewing it all. Then he called me. I found something, he said. What? A credit card transaction, made 2 weeks ago in Vancouver. My heart started racing. You're sure it's him? 90%. The card is registered to a company your son set up. The transaction was for a hotel room. Which hotel? The Fairmont, downtown Vancouver. Is he still there? I don't know, but I'm flying up tomorrow to check it out. I wanted to go with him, but Ray said no. If Daniel sees you, he'll bolt. Let me handle this. So I waited. Ray flew to Vancouver the next day. He called me that evening. The hotel confirms he checked in 2 weeks ago, checked out 3 days later. Where did he go? That's what I'm trying to find out. But I've got a lead. The hotel staff remembers him, said he was asking about flights to Asia. Asia? Hong Kong, specifically. My stomach sank. If Daniel made it to Hong Kong, we'd never find him. Can you track him? I asked. I'm working on it, but international travel is harder to trace. Do whatever you have to do. Ray spent another week chasing leads. Finally, he called with news. I found him. Where? Hong Kong. He's been there for the last 10 days. You're sure? I've got photo confirmation. He's staying at a hotel in Central. I've been watching him. What's he doing? Lying low, mostly. He goes out for meals, takes walks, doesn't seem to be working or meeting anyone. Is he alone? As far as I can tell. I thought about it. Daniel was in Hong Kong, untouchable. There was no extradition treaty for his crimes. Can you keep watching him? I asked. For how long? As long as it takes. That's going to get expensive. I don't care. Over the next month, Ray sent me regular updates. Photos of Daniel walking through the streets of Hong Kong. Reports of where he went, who he talked to, what he ate. He looked different, thinner. His hair was longer. He dressed casually, like a tourist. But he was paranoid. Ray said Daniel constantly checked over his shoulder, took random taxis, changed his routine every few days. He knows someone might be looking for him, Ray said. Good, let him be scared. But knowing where Daniel was didn't solve anything. He was thousands of miles away, beyond my reach, until Ray called with an interesting piece of information. Daniel's planning to leave Hong Kong, Ray said. Where's he going? I don't know yet, but he booked a flight, leaving in 3 days. Can you find out where? I'm working on it. 2 days later, Ray called back. He's going to Thailand. Bangkok. Why Bangkok? I don't know. But here's the interesting part. He booked a one-way ticket. Meaning what? Meaning he's not planning to come back. Whatever he's doing in Bangkok, it's permanent. I felt a surge of urgency. If Daniel disappeared into Thailand, we might never find him again. Can you follow him? I asked. Yes, but I'll need more resources. Thailand's a big country. Do it, whatever you need. Ray followed Daniel to Bangkok. The reports kept coming. Photos, updates, locations. Daniel had rented an apartment in a cheap neighborhood. He was living off cash, barely spending anything. He's trying to stretch his money, Ray said. Whatever he has left won't last forever. How long? A year, maybe 2. Then he'll run out. That gave me an idea. Ray, can you access his offshore accounts? What do you mean? Can you drain them? Take all his money? There was a long pause. That's illegal. I don't care. You could go to prison. So could Daniel. But he's not. So why should I care about legal? Another pause. I'd need a hacker, someone good, and it'll cost you. How much? 50,000, maybe more. Do it. It took 3 weeks. Ray connected me with a hacker who specialized in offshore accounts. I never learned his real name. He went by Ghost. Ghost was efficient. Within a week, he'd breached Daniel's accounts. All of them. The total is $412,000, Ghost told me over an encrypted chat. Can you move it? Yes. Where do you want it? I thought about it. I could take the money for myself, use it to rebuild, but that wasn't the point. Donate it, I said. To what? Split it. Half to a victims of fraud fund, half to the fire department that responded to the shop fire. You're sure? Yes. Do it. Ghost moved the money the next day. When it was done, I felt a strange satisfaction. Daniel had stolen from me. Now I'd taken everything from him. Ray called me a few days later. Daniel's in a panic, Ray said. What happened? He tried to access his accounts, found out they're empty. He's freaking out. Good. He's desperate now. That makes him dangerous. What's he going to do? I don't know, but he's making calls, sending emails, trying to figure out what happened. Will he find out it was me? Maybe. Ghost covered his tracks, but Daniel's not stupid. I didn't care if Daniel knew. In fact, I wanted him to know. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. Hello? You took my money. It was Daniel's voice. Angry, desperate. Yes, I did. That was theft. Just like what you did to me. That was different. How? Because I earned it. You stole it, and now I've taken it back. You can't do this. I already did. There was a long silence. Then Daniel said, This isn't over. Yes, it is. You have nothing left. No money, no business, no future. I'll make you pay. You already tried, and you failed. I hung up. Linda was standing in the doorway. Was that him? Yes. What did he say? That he's going to make me pay. Should we be worried? I don't know, but I'm not backing down. The next few weeks were tense. I waited for Daniel to make a move, but nothing happened. Ray kept watching him. Daniel had moved to an even cheaper apartment. He was barely eating, running out of money. He's broke, Ray said, completely tapped out. Good. What do you want me to do? Keep watching. Let me know if anything changes. But I was starting to feel like this wasn't enough. Daniel was suffering, yes. But he was still free, still alive, and I wanted more. I wanted him destroyed, completely and utterly destroyed. I started planning, thinking about the next move, how to hurt him worse. And then something unexpected happened. Ray called me one morning, his voice urgent. Daniel's on the move. Where's he going? I don't know, but he bought a plane ticket, leaving Bangkok tonight. Where's he going? Back to the States. What? He's flying to Los Angeles, arriving tomorrow morning. Why would he come back? There's a warrant for his arrest. I don't know. But he's coming. I hung up and immediately called Detective Brennan. Daniel's coming back, I said. What? He's flying into LAX tomorrow morning. You need to arrest him. How do you know this? I just know. Can you do it? I'll make some calls. But if he's really coming back, we'll be ready. I hung up and looked at Linda. He's coming back. Why? I don't know. But I'm going to find out. The next morning, I drove to the airport. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not Linda, not the police. I just needed to see Daniel, to look him in the eye. I waited in the arrivals area. The flight from Bangkok landed on time. Passengers started streaming out, and then I saw him. Daniel looked terrible, thin, hollow-eyed. He was carrying a small backpack, nothing else. He scanned the crowd. When his eyes met mine, he stopped. We stared at each other across the terminal. Then Daniel walked toward me. Dad? He said quietly. Why did you come back? Because I'm tired of running. So you're turning yourself in? No. He looked at me with something like sadness. I came back to end this, one way or another. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away. I started to follow, but suddenly there were police everywhere. They surrounded Daniel, guns drawn. Daniel Crawford, you're under arrest! Daniel didn't resist. He just put his hands up, letting them cuff him. As they led him away, he looked back at me one more time, and I saw something in his eyes that made me cold. This wasn't over. Daniel's arrest should have been the end of it. He was finally in custody, facing charges for embezzlement, arson, conspiracy. The prosecutors were confident they had enough to put him away for a decade, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The way Daniel had looked at me in the airport, that strange resignation in his eyes, like he'd already accepted defeat, but was planning something else. I told Detective Brennan about it. People react differently to arrest, he said. Some fight, some go quiet. Don't read too much into it. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Daniel was being held without bail. Too much of a flight risk, the judge said. His arraignment was scheduled for next week. Linda wanted to attend. I want to see him face the charges, she said. Why? Because I need to see it, to know it's really over. I understood that, but something in me resisted. Going to the arraignment felt like giving Daniel more attention, more power. I'll go, I said. You stay home. David, please let me handle this. She didn't argue. Maybe she was as exhausted as I was. The arraignment was held in a gray courthouse downtown. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as they brought Daniel in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him. He looked smaller somehow, defeated. The judge read the charges, 23 counts in total. Embezzlement, wire fraud, arson, conspiracy. The list went on. Daniel's lawyer entered a plea of not guilty. Standard procedure, the lawyer explained afterward. They'd negotiate a plea deal later. As they led Daniel out, he turned and scanned the courtroom. His eyes found mine. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked at me with that same strange expression from the airport. Then he was gone. I left the courthouse feeling unsettled. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. That night, I got a call from Richard. David, we have a problem. What now? Daniel's lawyer filed a motion. They're claiming you illegally accessed Daniel's offshore accounts. My stomach dropped. How did they find out? I don't know, but they have evidence. Bank records, transaction logs. They're saying you hired someone to hack the accounts and steal the money. That money was stolen from me in the first place. That's not how the law works. What you did was illegal. You could face charges. Charges? I'm the victim here. I know, but technically, you committed a crime, and Daniel's lawyer is going to use that against you. I hung up and sat in silence. This was what Daniel had been planning. Not escape, not revenge. Legal revenge. He was going to drag me down with him. Over the next week, the situation got worse. Daniel's lawyer filed more motions. They were building a case that I'd orchestrated everything, that I'd framed Daniel for crimes he didn't commit, that I'd stolen his money and destroyed his reputation. It was insane, but it was also effective. The media started running stories. Father and son's business war turns ugly. Who's the real villain? Some people believed Daniel's version of events. Social media exploded with arguments. Half the people thought I was justified. The other half thought I was a vindictive old man trying to destroy his son. I stopped reading the comments. Linda was furious. They're making you look like the bad guy. I know. We need to fight back. With what? Everything they're saying is technically true. I did access his accounts. I did hire someone to drain them. Because he stole from you first. Doesn't matter. I broke the law. Richard tried to find a solution. We can argue necessity, that you were recovering stolen funds. Will that work? Maybe, but it's risky. The prosecutor might decide to charge you just to close the loop. So what do? Hope that they focus on Daniel's crimes instead of yours. That was a thin hope. A week later, I got a subpoena. I was being called to testify at Daniel's trial. Not as a witness for the prosecution, as a witness for the defense. Daniel's lawyer wanted to put me on the stand, to make me admit what I'd done, to show the jury that I wasn't innocent either. This is a trap, Richard said. Obviously. If you testify, you'll have to admit to hacking the accounts. That gives them ammunition to charge you. What if I refuse? You can't. It's a subpoena. You have to comply. I was stuck. Either I testified and incriminated myself, or I refused and faced contempt charges. There has to be another way, Linda said. But there wasn't. We were out of options. The trial started 3 weeks later. It was a media circus. Reporters everywhere, protesters outside the courthouse, half supporting Daniel, half supporting me. I sat in the courtroom every day, watching. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Financial records, security footage, witness testimony. It was overwhelming. There was no way Daniel could win. But his lawyer was smart. Instead of denying the charges, they shifted the narrative. Made the trial about me. Yes, Daniel made mistakes, the lawyer said in her opening statement. But he was driven to it by a controlling, vindictive father who refused to let go of power. It was a lie, but it sounded plausible. The prosecution called their witnesses, employees from the shop, fire investigators, forensic accountants. Each one reinforced the case against Daniel. Then the defense started, and they called me to the stand. I walked up to the witness stand, my heart pounding. The bailiff swore me in. I sat down, facing the courtroom. Daniel's lawyer stood up. She was in her 40s, with sharp features and cold eyes. Mr. Crawford, she said, you love your son, don't you? I used to. That's a harsh thing to say about your own child. He burned down my business, stole from me, tried to ruin my life. What would you call that? I'd call it a family dispute that got out of hand. That's one way to put it. She paced in front of the jury. Mr. Crawford, isn't it true that you hired someone to illegally access your son's bank accounts? I glanced at Richard. He nodded slightly. Yes, I said. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. And isn't it true that you drained those accounts, taking over $400,000? Yes. $400,000 that belonged to your son. $400,000 that he stole from me. But you don't have proof of that, do you? Not for all of it. I have bank records. Bank records that could be interpreted multiple ways. The fact is, Mr. Crawford, you committed theft, just like you're accusing your son of doing. That's not the same thing, isn't it? You both took money that didn't belong to you. You both broke the law. I wanted to argue, to explain, but she was twisting everything. The cross-examination went on for an hour. She hammered me on every point. By the time I stepped down, I felt like I'd been the one on trial. Richard tried to reassure me. You did fine. The jury will see through it. But I wasn't sure about that. The trial continued for another week. More witnesses, more evidence, finally, closing arguments. The prosecutor went first. She laid out a clear, methodical case. Daniel had embezzled. He'd committed arson. He'd fled the country. The evidence was overwhelming. Then Daniel's lawyer gave her closing. She focused on me, painted me as a bitter old man who couldn't let go, who'd driven his son to desperation. Yes, Daniel made mistakes, she said. But who among us wouldn't, when pushed to the breaking point by someone who's supposed to love and support us? It was manipulative, emotional, and effective. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they came back, the courtroom was packed. I sat in the front row, Linda beside me. The foreman stood up. On the count of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. I felt a surge of relief. On the count of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Good. Keep going. On the count of arson, we find the defendant not guilty. My heart sank. The foreman continued. More guilty verdicts on the fraud charges, but not guilty on the arson, not guilty on conspiracy. The jury had split the difference. They believed Daniel had stolen money, but they didn't believe he'd burned down the shop. Daniel's lawyer had created enough doubt. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. As they led Daniel out, he looked at me again. This time, he smiled. That night, Linda and I sat in silence. He got away with it, she said. Not all of it. He'll still do time. But not enough. She was right. Daniel would get maybe 5 years. With good behavior, he'd be out in 3. 3 years for destroying everything I'd built. It wasn't justice. I started drinking that night, more than I should have. Linda tried to stop me. David, this isn't helping. I don't care. We can appeal. Appeal what? The jury made their decision. But he burned down the shop. We know he did. Knowing isn't the same as proving. I poured another drink. Over the next few days, I spiraled. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could think about was Daniel's smug smile in the courtroom. He'd won. Not completely, but enough. And I'd lost. Richard called me. The prosecutor wants to talk to you. About what? About charging you for the bank account hack. My hands started shaking. Are they serious? They're considering it. They want to make an example. Show that vigilante justice has consequences. I was recovering stolen money. They see it differently. I hung up and looked at Linda. They might charge me. She went pale. What? For hacking Daniel's accounts. The prosecutor's considering it. That's insane. That's the law. We sat in silence. Everything I'd done to fight back, to get justice, was about to come crashing down on me. A week later, I got a call from Richard. Good news, the prosecutor's dropping it. What? They decided not to charge you. Too much public sympathy. They don't want to look like they're punishing a victim. I felt dizzy with relief. So that's it? I'm clear? For now. But David, don't do anything like this again. I won't. I hung up and told Linda. We held each other for a long time. 2 weeks later, Daniel was sentenced. 5 years in federal prison. Restitution of $300,000. It was something, but it wasn't enough. As I left the courthouse that day, a reporter stopped me. Mr. Crawford, how do you feel about the sentence? I looked at the camera. My son destroyed my life. 5 years isn't justice, but it's a start. The reporter kept asking questions, but I walked away. Linda and I drove home in silence. When we got there, we sat in the living room. What now? Linda asked. I don't know. Do we move on? Try to rebuild? I thought about it. The business was gone. Daniel was in prison. Jessica was in prison. We'd won, technically, but it didn't feel like victory. Maybe, I said. Maybe we try to move on. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. Not yet.